Welcome to the deep dive. We heard from quite a few of you wanting to really get a handle on emotional unavailability.
That's right. Specifically, how it might present in women within relationships.
Exactly. It's that sense maybe that you're trying to connect on a deeper level, but you keep hitting some kind of invisible barrier. We've looked into some really insightful material for this.
Yeah, and it sounds like you, the listener, might be wrestling with some confusing dynamics, maybe some mixed messages. That's what we're aiming to unpack today.
Okay. So emotional unavailability itself. It's not simply about someone not having feelings, is it?
No, not at all, actually. It's more about a difficulty, sometimes an avoidance, in really forming or letting those deep emotional connections actually grow.
Okay, let's dig into that
Yeah,
because, the immediate assumption can be, oh, they just don't care, but it sounds much more nuanced.
it really is. Think of it less like a choice not to care and more like an internal defense system. There's often a real struggle with vulnerability, with allowing that true intimacy.
Like appreciating something beautiful from afar, maybe, but being hesitant to get too close.
That's a great analogy, actually. Yeah. Hesitant to examine the finer details, the potential imperfections, perhaps.
Okay. So where does this often come from? Our sources mentioned a few potential origins.
Well, several things can play a role. Past emotional hurts,
Hmm.
experiences that were painful, they can definitely lead someone to build protective walls.
Makes sense. A fear of getting hurt again.
A very powerful motivator, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are what we often call attachment issues. These patterns form early on, often based on relationships with caregivers.
Right. Like if care was inconsistent.
Exactly. Someone might learn to be highly self-reliant and avoid deep emotional bonds later because that vulnerability felt unsafe or unreliable back then. And of course, unresolved stuff from past relationships or other major life events can linger too.
So often it's rooted in their history, not necessarily a direct comment on the person they're with now.
That's a really important point.
But for this deep dive, our focus is helping listeners spot the signs. How does this unavailability actually look in women within dating or committed relationships? What are those flags?
Right. Because recognizing the patterns in behavior is, well, it's the crucial first step to understanding what might be going on.
Okay, first one, and I think this resonates with a lot of people, mixed signals. Tell us about that.
Ah, yes, the hot and cold. It's that really confusing inconsistency. One minute they seem warm, engaged, maybe even really flirty. You feel a real connection building,
And then poof.
pretty much. Then
Bam.
suddenly they're distant, maybe slow to respond, seem kind of checked out, or even cold. The warmth just evaporates.
That emotional roller coaster leaves you feeling completely off balance.
Totally. And the key thing here often is that it's not necessarily done to you, if that makes sense. It can come from that internal conflict.
The desire for connection warring with the fear.
Exactly. A real desire for closeness might be there. But as it starts to feel real, that underlying fear of vulnerability gets triggered and they pull back. They create distance almost instinctively.
Okay, that explains a lot. So constantly feeling like you're guessing where you stand, big flag. What's next on the list?
Next up is a consistent pattern of avoiding deep conversations.
Okay. So not just being a bit private sometimes, but actively steering clear.
Right. Look for resistance when you try to talk about feelings, yours or theirs, or discussions about the relationship's future, or even just digging into the why behind certain emotions.
How does that resistance show up? Like, what does someone do?
Could be several things. Maybe they use humor or sarcasm to deflect whenever something serious comes up.
Change the subject?
Oh, absolutely. A quick pivot to something completely mundane. Or they might just sort of shut down, become quiet, disengaged, maybe suddenly too tired to talk. It signals discomfort without saying it directly.
The underlying issue being that discomfort with emotional depth, preferring to keep things lighter.
Precisely. They feel safer on the surface level.
Which leads neatly into the next point, keeping you at arm's length. How's this different from just, taking time to open up?
It's subtle, yeah. Someone keeping you at arm's length might actually share quite a bit about their life, their daily activities, opinions, hobbies.
Like, their favorite coffee shop, but not their biggest fear.
Exactly. You get the surface details, the facts, maybe even preferences like our sources mention. But the inner world, their personal history, their deep-seated fears, what truly makes them tick on an emotional level that remains off limits.
So there's engagement, but it doesn't cross a certain threshold into real vulnerability.
You got it. They maintain this consistent emotional distance. You might know about a stressful situation at work, for instance, But if you ask how it made them feel, they might deflect or give a very superficial answer. That's the arm's length.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would feel incomplete, like you're not really being let in. Now, this next one feels a bit counterintuitive, maybe. Excessive talk about exes. Why is that a red flag?
It's not about mentioning past relationships ever, of course.
Hmm.
Healthy reflection is fine. The red flag is about the way they talk about them. It often signals unresolved emotional baggage.
What should you be listening for? What kind of tone or focus?
You might notice persistent bitterness or anger, suggesting they haven't moved past the hurt. Or the opposite, maybe excessive nostalgia, like they're idealizing a past relationship in a way that feels disconnected from reality or dismissive of the present one.
Or constantly comparing.
Definitely. Frequent comparisons, whether favorable or unfavorable, show that the ex is still taking up significant emotional real estate. It suggests they aren't fully emotionally present or ready for the new relationship.
That makes sense. Hard to build something new if you're still living emotionally in the past. Okay, red flag number 5. Over-prioritizing independence. This one's tricky, right? Independence is good.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Healthy independence, self-reliance, those are strengths. The issue arises when that independence becomes like an emotional fortress.
A shield.
Exactly. A shield against vulnerability, against relying on someone, against interdependence. It's when there's this constant, strong emphasis on, I don't need anyone, almost like a mantra.
So it's beyond just being capable. It's actively pushing away connection or support.
Yeah. Healthy independence allows for interdependence, being strong on your own and able to lean on a partner and be leaned on. This type of over-prioritization actively resists that. It can often stem from past experiences where, depending on others, led to pain.
So it hinders that sense of true partnership.
It really can. It creates a barrier where mutual support and vulnerability are meant to grow.
Got it. Okay, next. Avoidance of labels or commitment. The classic. Let's just see where things go.
Yes, very common. This is when, even after a decent amount of time has passed, maybe significant emotional adjustment has happened, there's still a real reluctance to, define the relationship or even talk about where it might be heading.
So it's not just about taking things slow initially, but a persistent ambiguity.
Right. Phrases like, let's just go with the flow, or I'm not into labels, can be fine early on. But if months or even longer go by and there's still resistance to any kind of definition or discussion about the future, despite what feels like a real connection.
It could signal they're not actually available for the level of commitment you might want.
Exactly. It can indicate a discomfort with that level of emotional investment or future planning.
Feels like keeping one foot out the door, emotionally speaking. Okay, the final red flag we'll cover. A lack of empathy or emotional support. This feels huge.
It's absolutely fundamental. A relationship needs that give and take, that mutual emotional reciprocity. If that's missing, it's a major problem.
So what does that look like? If you share something vulnerable, how might they react in a way that shows this lack of empathy?
Well, you might just get silence or a dismissive response, something that minimizes what you're feeling, like, oh, it's not that bad, or you're overreacting.
Or even making you feel bad for needing support.
Unfortunately, yes. Sometimes they might turn it around, making you feel guilty or burdensome for expressing vulnerability or having emotional needs. It completely undermines the safety a relationship should provide.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds incredibly isolating. Okay, so we've covered these key signs, and it's crucial, as our sources stress, to remember the why often isn't about intentionally hurting someone.
Such an important point. Like we touched on, often this stems from past hurts, maybe environments where showing emotion wasn't safe. Understanding that potential background can foster some compassion.
And this is but understanding the reason doesn't mean you have to accept the behavior if it's hurting you, right?
Absolutely not. That's a critical distinction. You can have empathy for their history, for why they might be this way, but still recognize that the behavior itself is damaging the connection and your own well-being.
Understanding isn't the same as excusing or enduring.
Perfectly put.
But
You're not obligated to stay in a dynamic where your core emotional needs are consistently unmet, no matter the reason behind their unavailability.
so for listeners recognizing these patterns, what are the next steps? What can they actually do? The sources had some practical advice.
First things first, boundaries. Get really clear with yourself about what you need and what is and isn't acceptable for you in a relationship. What are your non-negotiables?
Know your limits for how you deserve to feel and be treated.
Exactly. Then try having honest conversations. Calmly, gently express what you're experiencing, the emotional gaps you're noticing. Use I feel statements.
Not accusatory, but sharing your experience.
Right. Sometimes people genuinely aren't aware of the impact their behavior has.
Hmm.
Approach it as trying to understand, too.
Okay. And if those talks don't lead anywhere, this next point feels vital. Don't try to fix her.
Oh, absolutely crucial. You can't force someone to change, especially when it comes to deep-seated emotional patterns. They have to be willing and ready to do that work themselves.
It's not your job to heal their past.
It's really not. Trying to
Yeah.
take that on usually just leads to burnout and resentment for you.
Which leads us, inevitably, to the toughest step sometimes, knowing when to walk away.
Ultimately, you have to prioritize your own emotional health. If your needs are consistently unmet, if you feel perpetually anxious or unsupported despite your best efforts,
And it might be time to choose yourself.
it might be the healthiest choice, yes. Protecting your well-being has to come first.
It really circles back to that fundamental idea, doesn't it? Love, partnership, it should feel like a safe harbor.
It really should. A space where you feel seen, heard, valued for who you are, emotional needs and all.
And while emotional unavailability isn't necessarily a character flaw, it is a barrier to creating that kind of secure, supportive connection.
Precisely. It prevents that mutual vulnerability and support from truly flourishing.
So the takeaway for listeners, it is okay, more than okay. It's necessary sometimes to step back from relationships where your fundamental emotional needs just aren't being met.
Absolutely. You deserve a connection that feels emotionally fulfilling and secure.
So maybe a final thought to ponder after this deep dive. Take a moment to reflect on what a truly supportive, emotionally available connection actually looks and feels like for you. Getting clear on that is incredibly powerful. Thanks for exploring this with us today.